Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome to Paranormal Review Radio, the only paranormal show on Blog Talk Radio that discusses a variety of topics with facts, opinions, and fun. We don't claim to be experts in the field, but rather everyday people who want to learn and express everything paranormal. We bring you theories on both sides of the topic and let you, the listener, make your own minds. My name is Anthony Agati, broadcasting from New York City, and my co-host from Chicago is Luci Liebfried. Luci, why don't you say hello to our listeners and give them some info?
Hi, Anthony. Hi, everyone. We have a great show for you tonight. Our phone lines are open, so give us a call. Our show number is 661-244-9831. The phone lines are open throughout the entire show, so join the conversation. And if you don't feel like calling in, our chat room is open, so post your comments, questions, or feel free to further the discussion with other members. Don't forget, we do have a Facebook page, Paranormal Review Radio. Stop by and visit and also learn more about tonight's show. So, Anthony, what spooky thing are we going to talk about tonight?
Well, tonight I thought we would review the phenomena surrounding haunted objects. Specifically, what could be any more creepier than haunted dolls? Okay, well, maybe haunted people would be a bit creepier, but still, haunted dolls rank right up there. Luci and I are going to explore the history of haunted dolls, famous haunted dolls reported like Robert the Doll, talk about possession, voodoo. We're also going to hint at demonology, and we're going to travel around the world to discuss haunted dolls in otherworldly cultures, including the weirdest destination on Earth, La Isla de las Muñecas, Island of the Dolls. Yes, this place actually exists. Maybe we'll even discuss some of the haunted dolls that made it popular on the big screen, like Child's Play and Trilogy of Terror, if you're familiar with that one. At the end of our Haunted Doll show, we will report on some of the most current and up-to-date paranormal world news, and as promised, announce a few paranormal investigative groups that Luci and I would like to highlight and promote. So sit back, dim the lights, and let's discuss those creepy little buggers we so endearingly call haunted dolls.
Okay, Anthony. Wait, let me dim down the lights a little bit.
Okay. All right.
That's good. Now I'm ready. Okay. We've got a lot of information crammed into this show, so I'm going to start with discussing the theory behind haunted objects in general. What makes an object haunted or possessed? What is it that seeps into something that has no soul and carries with it the pain of a broken heart or the gruesome hatred of death? Call it cursed or call it a blessing. These objects are all around us, whether we choose to believe it or not. Can a painting be haunted? Can a piano or a chair hold some sort of spiritual possession? According to many witnesses, they sure can. Whatever it is, the theory behind haunted objects are said to be the metaphysical emotion and spirit forced onto them by their previous owners, now deceased. So far, does this make you think twice about picking up that item the next time you stumble upon a garage sale? I know it does me. Most of us who have lost someone have something to remember them by, something that was special, something that was just theirs. People have done this through the ages. In holding on to these objects, are we holding on to a small piece of them? Is it our memory of them being imprinted on the object? I've heard psychics say that people who hold onto the items of a deceased one hold onto their soul and do not allow them to move on. Do we attach these people to these objects? It is believed that a spirit can become attached to something through witchcraft or various rituals, or just an overwhelming fondness for the object when the spirit was in human form. Beds are a common source of haunts. This would seem understandable because we spend half our lives in bed. A lot of our energy has to be left behind. We dream and we have nightmares in our beds. And if we leave our bodies during dreams, I would suppose we would do that in bed too. So I can see a lot of essence or residual energy being left behind. Many people have died there in bed. Dolls are another common object. Dolls are another object common to haunts. Small children also get a lot of emotional energy while holding on to their doll. Abused children cling to their dolls. Most children take their doll or bear or whatever to bed with them. Whatever the case, however, this happens, it does. Or at least it does seem to.
Is anyone familiar with the name John Zaffis? Well, if you aren't, John Zaffis is a famous paranormal researcher and demonologist. He's been coined the godfather of paranormal. Besides running the Paranormal and Demonology Research Center in New England, John holds a private museum in his home in Connecticut of haunted items. It's pretty creepy, right? Now, for over 35 years, John has been investigating the paranormal and removing haunted objects from homes as a remedy to these hauntings. He will bring these items back to his home and place them in his museum. I wonder why, then, his house isn't haunted. John had said once, and this is a quote that he gave out in an interview, "When I was 16, I had a vision of my grandfather at the foot of my bed, and that's when I first started questioning everything," he said. "Since then, I've been investigating the paranormal really heavy duty over the years. It started with the items when, way back, a person brought to me a knickknack that its owner said that there was something with it." He says that having these objects in his home makes him sort of nervous, which I'm sure would everybody, and thinks one day they're all going to actually wake up and blow up his house. But he does do binding rituals and prayers with these items.
Wow. Anthony, I remember when you and I went on an investigation at Eastern State Penitentiary, and John Zaffis was with us. I really like his style. He doesn't play. He's direct. He's serious, and he gets results. And he's one heck of a nice guy.
Yeah, he is a nice guy, actually.
Okay, so now that we've introduced the topic of possessed objects, let's get down to the meat of why we're on the radio tonight. Ooh, haunted dolls. I get creeped out just saying that.
There's just something sinister about a doll being possessed or haunted. I remember actually watching the movie Trilogy of Terror in the late 1970s, and it freaked the shit out of me watching that ancient doll come alive, attack and possess the actress Karen Black. That was freaky.
Oh, my God. When I first saw it, I was absolutely fascinated by the story. I thought that little guy was funny, but he was so terrifying. Oh, I could feel the bites on my legs.
Well, actually, speaking of bites on legs, we should discuss voodoo.
Oh, God. That was such a bad segue.
Yeah, I know, but let's just talk about voodoo. Using dolls and effigies in sympathetic magic rituals is as old as humankind. More often than not, ritual dolls and effigies were used for healing, fertility, and empowerment. In some cultures, such as ancient Greece, they were used to bind enemies. European Poppets were widely used in folk magic and witchcraft to curse on an enemy. Other types of dolls were used in harvest customs and burial rites, made as talismans or used as teaching aids for children. Beyond the era of ancient dolls, voodoo dolls, as we know them today, are created for many purposes. In New Orleans, which can be considered the contemporary hub of voodoo dolls in America, they were created as gris-gris. It's a form of talismanic magic. The word gris means gray, denoting that which lies between black and white. Gris-gris is both a noun and a verb, referring to a ritually prepared object such as a doll or a small cloth bag filled with magical ingredients, as well as the act of working the gris-gris. In New Orleans, there are four main categories of gris-gris: love, power, domination, luck and finance, and uncrossing. These four categories are among the most commonly requested gris-gris associated with voodoo dolls. Traditionally, voodoo dolls are created to represent a deity, or to a house of spirit, not unlike the Nkisi. statues of power used throughout the Congo Basin in Central Africa that are thought to contain spiritual powers of spirits. Although they are most commonly depicted as objects of revenge, most practitioners of voodoo make a concentrated effort to disassociate from the malevolent use of voodoo dolls, which is considered a form of bokor voodoo or sorcery. Instead, voodoo dolls are created and used for positive purposes. Approximately 90% of the use of voodoo dolls is centered on healing, finding true love, and spiritual guidance. They are also used as focusing tools in ritual and meditation. The Nkisi literally translates as sacred medicine. The term Nkisi is the general name for a variety of holy objects used throughout the Congo Basin in Central Africa, thought to contain spiritual powers of spirits, called mpongo. The Nkisi are primarily containers. They're ceramic vessels, sort of gourds or animal horns and shells and bundles, or any other object that contains spiritually charged substances. Even graves can be considered a Nkisi because they house the spirits of the dead. Nkisi are often referred to as portable graves because they may contain personal items of a powerful individual as one of the main ingredients. Among the slave population in Louisiana during the 18th and 19th centuries, image magic using dolls was commonplace. Image magic is a type of magic based on the concept of like attracts like and is discussed in greater detail. Archaic dolls bound with catgut or twine and stuck with pins or fish bones have been discovered on several Louisiana plantations. Some of these figural forms found among the slave population bore a striking resemblance to the boccio of Africa. The boccio figurines were aesthetically provocative empowerment objects produced primarily in the lower western African regions of Benin and Togo. These figures were artistic assemblages as well as magical objects and would often have a variety of items attached to the figure. For example, personal items, cloth, rope, nails, or tacks, were driven into the figure to activate its power and invoke the spirit. According to Moreau de Saint-Marais, the Africans believed in magic that the power of their fetishes have followed them across the sea. Little crude figures of wooden or stone representing men or animals are of them things of natural power, and they call them guard corps, or bodyguards, basically. They are a number of Negroes who acquire absolute power over others by this means, and that's their direct quote. The boccio figurines were more than just scary-looking magical objects. They served as psychotherapeutic role as well. Traditionally, boccio were created in response to specific needs and were believed to help people influence events in their lives for positive or negative ends. For example, boccio may be constructed for protection from illness, safety on the road, to prevent success in economic matters, or fertility. It is easy to envision some of the reasons boccio may have been created and employed by slaves. For example, they may have been used for protection from abuse and brutality, safety from the family, revenge for abuse suffered at the hands of their masters, and or to promote freedom from bondage. Obviously, boccio were a powerful means for psychological catharsis as well as an effective tool for empowerment in the context of social and political crisis. Like modern-day voodoo dolls, the process of creating a boccio was an empowering activity and sometimes involved more than one person. For example, there was an artist who created the raw figure, the diviner, who activated the object by attaching a variety of personal items to the sculpture, and the client who uses it in a particular ritual context. Sometimes one person completed all three steps, which may have resulted in an enhanced sense of empowerment for that individual. In Haiti, another form of doll emerged that may have been taking the place of the more threatening boccio. Cloth dolls were created and brought to cemeteries to activate their power. Sometimes these cloth dolls were brought to cemeteries and nailed to a tree with an old shoe and an attached message to act as messengers to the spirit world. The authentic African fetish was carved in the Congo from a single piece of native wood. The costume is woven of straw and then carefully sewn onto the carving. This type of fetish is believed by its creators to have magical powers. It is used in ceremonies, especially male puberty rites, to ward off evil spirits and undesirable women. The male adults dress up in similar life-size straw costumes and in masks.
Well, Anthony, if you remember, I have mentioned my fascination with New Orleans. I feel a very strong connection with the French Quarter. I know one of my past lives was spent in the Quarter. I've always felt like I was coming home every time I visit. Well, part of that fascination does extend to voodoo dolls. I collect them. And it's not just the dolls sold to tourists at the airport or in gift shops or even in Jackson Square. No, I'm talking about the ones that you kind of have to search for. They will find you. Look to the French market, the temples, but you will not find a real one just by asking for it. The power is to be respected and not to be a souvenir. Now, I must warn you, they are something to be careful with. You must respect them. They have personalities, depending upon the purpose that they were made for. You know how in some movies and in stories and in legends they always say, never leave your hair or nail clippings where someone can find it? Well, I feel that that's partially true. Now, mind you, all of this is coming from someplace in my head. As we always say, we don't claim to be experts, but I have this in my head. I can see it. I can feel it. I can picture it clear as day. Well, getting back to my dolls, some dolls are made from real human hair, and legend has it that if you're trying, God forbid, to harm someone, or if you're trying to make that obsession of yours love you, you'll need something that belongs to them: hair, nails, items of clothing. A possession of the person who is the subject will work also. It's also said that you can use a bit of the object's handwriting. Now, the doll itself can be made of straw, wood, twigs, almost anything. It is the shape and the purpose which defines the doll. Some are absolutely beautiful with colorful bits of cloth. Some are plain little things made of burlap. There are so many different ones. My collection has been gathered over the years, and my babies are well taken care of. I do know a story about a woman who was given a doll as a gift. She put it on her desk. She made fun of it, and then she eventually left it in a drawer. She went to another job, and she never took her doll. She allegedly experienced bad luck after that. Her marriage broke up. Her child was in an accident. Several things happened. Now, whether it was the doll or just unfortunate circumstances is a subject for discussion. But those who believe in the power of the doll say she brought it upon herself when she made fun of it. The doll was rescued, and now it sits in a place of honor on another desk. It's said that the woman's luck changed for the better after that. Kind of scary, right, Anthony?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I want to talk about Native American dolls, specifically the Hopi Kachina dolls. Now, to understand Hopi Kachina dolls, one must understand something of their purpose. The Kachina doll of the Hopi, which so many of us admire and collect, is a representation of a Hopi spirit or deity. Kachina dolls originally, and still are, made to be given away as gifts to Hopi children so that they may learn the different Kachinas and the stories and religious significance attached to them. Kachinas are holy spirits that live upon the San Francisco peaks in Arizona and other sacred mountains in the Southwest. During the period beginning with the winter solstice and extending to about mid-July, masked dancers initiated into the various clans of the Hopi Pueblos impersonate these spirits. Men portray both male and female spirits, and when an initiate wears the mask of his Kachina, he becomes that spirit personified. During the open dances, the Kachinas dance in the plaza or from kiva to kiva, distributing the Kachina dolls, toy bows, rattles, fruits, and sweets to children in between the dances. Kachinas can be spirits of deities, animals, and even the deceased members of the Pueblo known for a special kindness or a prowess. One such Kachina, Hewihuto, wears the black face of a warrior. She is powerful and terrible to behold. She holds a bow, and her hair is tied up on one side onto a wooden form used to create the whirl hair design of a Hopi maiden. Her hair is down and flowing on the other side, the aspect in which she was found as her mother was preparing her hair when an enemy attacked the Pueblo. The men were tending to their field, and the young maiden jumped up to take her father's bow and lead the women in a valiant defense of the Pueblo until the men could join the battle and defeat the enemy. This Kachina is so powerful that whipper Kachinas stay the spectators from her path and keep them from being harmed by her spirit. The Kachina impersonators give the spirits a form that can interact with the human and can be seen as intermediaries between the Hopi Pueblo and the spirits themselves. While the Kachinas are present, they are constantly offered prayers by the spectators, who sprinkle the dancers with corn pollen as they pass or encountered. In this way, the blessings between the Kachinas and the people can be exchanged before the Kachinas return to their mountain homes in the summer. Plaza dancers were at one time open to all, but because of ignorant and sometimes reprehensible behavior of increasingly large groups of tourists, all the dances are now closed to the public.
All right, so Luci just talked about Native American dolls. I'm going to head over to Asia and talk about the Hina Matsuri dolls. Central to Hina Matsuri are the displays of beautiful traditional dolls, or the Hina Ningyu in Japanese. The origin of the dolls is the ancient belief that dolls could be used to trap and contain evil spirits. Straw dolls would be floated down the river, supposedly taking the bad spirits away with them, thus ensuring safety and good luck for the children. In the Heian period, the tradition of displaying dolls began, which is why the tradition dolls wear the clothes styles of the Heian imperial court. These costumes are elaborate, multi-layered silk kimono, often heavily embroidered in gold and vibrant colored silks. A traditional doll in a handcrafted miniature costume can cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars, so doll sets are often passed down as family heirlooms, being added to each generation. Dolls are displayed from mid-February or even earlier, but are taken down immediately after the festival. It is believed that displaying the dolls after March 4th will mean late marriage for the daughters of the house.
Yeah, Anthony, I heard about a beautiful film portrayal of the Hina display, and that's in Akira Kurosawa's film Dreams, Yume, which was released in 1990. The film consists of a number of short episodes, and the second one allows a small boy a vision of 5 complete sets of Hina, like the ones his sister is displaying, come to life and dancing for him because of his sorrow at the loss of the family peach orchard. Now, the story emphasizes, as do the film's other episodes, the intimate link between the Japanese culture and the Japanese natural environment.
Luci, have you ever heard of the Poppet dolls? Did you ever find anything out on them?
Yes, I did. And actually, it's like the Voodoo dolls that we mentioned earlier. Poppets are a magical doll used to represent a particular person during spell work and ritual magic. Now, these dolls have been much maligned and misunderstood over recent decades, mainly due to the media of film and TV portraying the popular image of a doll stuck full of pins in an effort to maim or curse. While it's certainly true that what has the power to heal has the power to curse, the Poppet doll is a wonderful tool to engage the positive side of magic. Now, Poppets have been used throughout the ages for all kinds of purposes and have firm links to Voodoo, although they're popular to many cultures. Now, this sounds much like what I mentioned before, but here goes, okay? Poppets can be made from all sorts of materials: clay, wax, mud, and cloth. In fact, anything that can be molded to represent a person. And these dolls have been used for both malignant purposes as well as benevolent. It is a magical doll that has been made for a magical or ritual purpose. The doll is made to represent and therefore substitute the person for whom the doll has been made. The making of the doll itself is important and will usually take much concentration and focus of intent. Ideally, the doll will have items belonging to the person it is intended for, and these would be working into its making. For example, it could be made from the material belonging to a garment that has been worn by the person. Hair and nail clippings, like I said before, can be used. Even bodily fluids such as blood, semen, saliva. They've all been used through the ages. The important thing is to link the puppet to the intended person as thoroughly as possible. Now, once the doll has been created to the maker's satisfaction, life is breathed into the doll by blowing breath into the puppet's mouth. This is traditionally done by blowing through a drinking straw. The puppet is then named and is from then on considered to be the person it was designed for. The puppet is then looked after with great care until the spell is done and then destroyed completely, destroying the link between it and its human counterpart. These magical dolls are a wonderful example of sympathetic magic, which is one of the oldest and most commonly performed magical arts, particularly in modern-day witchcraft. Sympathetic magic works on two principles or laws, these being the law of similarity and the law of contact, and the puppet illustrates these beautifully. The law of similarity states that like produces like, which means that the witch or the magician can produce a desired effect simply by imitating that effect. So a puppet is made to represent and therefore substitute a particular person. The law on contact states that whatever is done to an object will equally affect the person to whom the object once belonged or has contact with. We use this principle in puppet magic by obtaining something that either belonged to or came from the person whom the doll is intended, as outlined above, as I mentioned before. Finally, it is the magical intent that feeds the spell that's being created. This forms the link within either between the puppet and the intended recipient and is created by the will of the practitioner. In the end, it is the intent, the will, and magical ability of the practitioner that brings it all together and finalizes the outcome.
Here's some cool info that I found on the Island of the Dolls. In the late 1940s, Don Julian Santana was married and living in coastal Mexico. Around 1950, the young man became disillusioned with family life and the world. So he left it all behind and moved to a small exotic island that would come to be called La Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Dolls. Santana spent the last 50 years of his life on the island, ever so often wandering into nearby port cities for supplies and other goods. He never divorced, but rarely saw his children or invited friends out to visit. People respected the privacy of an aging man who renounced modern society. Time passed, and mainland dwellers became unnerved by the odd acquisitions Santana made with each visit, namely old unwanted dolls. He would gather them from local garbage dumps, trash cans, or the side of the road. Sometimes he traded fresh fruit grown on the island for a frayed and forgotten artifact from some stranger's childhood. Ironically, Santana appeared to be swapping his own memories for those discarded by others. Eventually, someone asked Santana what he did with the dolls. His chilling response spread quickly through the area. It seems that Santana's island was haunted by a wicked little girl who drowned in the island's canal. She stalked Santana and messingly occupied every facet of his life, blaming him for her watery death. He took the dolls back to the island where he spread them out, tying them to trees, to his house, and to other objects in an attempt to distract and appease the child's spirit. In 2001, Don Julian Santana stopped coming into town. Sometime after, the locals summoned the courage to go to his island, where they discovered his body drowned in the same canal that had claimed his ghostly tormentor. It seems fitting that Santana, a man who rejected the life that was given to him, was haunted by a manifestation that desired the life that was taken away from her. Santana's legacy has resulted in one of the creepiest locales in the world. The small island is creatively littered with plastic corpses representing discarded childhood memories. For reasons unknown, some dolls were left intact while others were dismembered or seemingly tortured by the Mexican recluse. Although Santana claimed he gathered the playthings to appease a menacing spirit, it is perhaps more likely that the Island of the Dolls was the physical manifestation of a deeply troubled mind. Or maybe Santana established his own silent society to ward off those who would interrupt his idol. The Island of the Dolls exists today as one of the most popular, peculiar man-made sites in our world. not for the supposed haunting, but because it offers a window into one's individual, unconventional relationship to place and memory. It is a reminder of our own desires to break free from unwritten societal rules and establish our own safe haven where we can live and die as we choose.
You know, I really want to go there.
I know.
I remember watching the Island of the Dolls episode on Destination Truth on the Sci-Fi Channel with Josh Gates. It really creeped me out. But it has to be one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. One of the dolls actually opens its eyes on camera. So, you know what? Right now, I wonder if any of our listeners have had any run-ins with creepy dolls. So let me take this time to remind you, if you've got a weird or paranormal experience with a haunted doll, please feel free to give us a call. The number is 661-244-9831. Let us know what you think about the haunted dolls. We'd love to speak with you and discuss.
Well, until we get a caller, why don't we talk about some of the most famous haunted dolls that have been documented?
Okay. I want to start by discussing one of the most well-known haunted dolls, and her name is Annabelle. Annabelle was the focus of a case that same paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, took part in during the early 1970s. And it's highlighted in the book, The Demonologist. It has been stated that this is one of the most unusual cases of a possessed object on record. In 1970, a mother purchased an antique Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store. Now, the doll was a present for her daughter, Donna, on her birthday. Donna, at the time, was a student in college. She was preparing to graduate with her nursing degree, and she resided in a tiny apartment with her roommate, Angie, and she was a nurse as well. Now, pleased with the doll, Donna placed it on her bed as a decoration, and she didn't give it a second thought until a few days later. Within that time, both Donna and Angie noticed that there appeared to be something very strange and creepy about this doll. The doll apparently moved on its own, relatively unnoticeable movements at first, like a change in position, but as time passed, the movement became more noticeable. Donna and Angie would come home to find the doll in a completely different room from where they left it. Sometimes the doll would be found cross-legged on the couch with its arms folded. Other times it was found upright, standing on its feet, leaning against a chair in the dining room. Oh, my God. Several times Donna placed the doll on the couch before leaving for work, and then she'd return home to find the doll back in her room on the bed with the door closed. Apparently, the doll not only moved, but it could write, too. About a month into their experience, Donna and Angie began to find penciled messages on parchment paper that read, "Help us and help Lou." The handwriting looked like it belonged to that of a small child. Now, the creepy part about the message was not the wording, but the way they were written. At the time, Donna had never kept any parchment paper on which the notes were written in the house, so where did they come from? Donna was finally willing to believe the spirit in the house was not that of a young girl, but inhuman and demonic in nature. Donna felt it was time to seek real expert advice and contacted an Episcopal priest named Father Hagen. Father Hagen referred their case to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed and Lorraine Warren immediately took interest in the case and contacted Donna concerning the doll. Now, the Warrens, after grueling over the case facts for hours, came to the conclusion that the doll itself was not, in fact, possessed, but haunted. Spirits do not possess inanimate objects like houses or toys. They possess people. A spirit will attach itself to an object, and this is what occurred in Annabelle's case. The spirit moved the doll around and created the illusion of it being alive. Truly, the spirit was not looking to stay attached to the doll, but it was looking to possess a human host. The spirit in this case, was an inhuman demonic spirit, and it was essentially the infestation stage of the phenomenon. It first began moving the doll around the apartment by means of teleportation to arouse the occupants' curiosity in hopes that they would make the predictable mistake of bringing a medium into the apartment to communicate with it, which the girls actually did. Now, able to communicate through the medium, the entity preyed on the girls' emotional vulnerabilities by pretending to be a rather harmless young girl, and which during the seance managed to extract permission from Donna to haunt the apartment. Insofar as demonic is a negative spirit, it then set about causing patently negative phenomena to occur. It aroused fear through weird movements of the doll. It brought about the materialization of disturbing handwriting notes. It left a residue of blood on the doll, and it even stuck the loo on the chest, leaving behind claw marks. Now, the next stage of the phenomena would have been complete human possession. Had these experiences lasted another 2 or 3 weeks, the spirit would have completely possessed, if not harmed or killed, one or all of the occupants of the house. Now, at the conclusion of the investigation, the Warrens felt it was appropriate to have a recitation of an exorcism blessing by a priest to cleanse the apartment. The Episcopal blessing of the home is a wordy 7-page document that is distinctly positive in nature. Rather than specifically expelling evil entities from the dwelling, the emphasis instead is directed towards filling the home with the power of positive and of God. Ed Warren, at Donna's request, and as further precaution against the phenomena ever occurring again, the Warrens took the big rag doll along with them when they left. Now, for the next few days, after the Warrens arrived home, Ed set the doll in a chair next to his desk. The doll levitated a number of times in the beginning, and then it seemed to fall inert. During the ensuing weeks, however, it began showing up in various rooms of the house. When the Warrens were away and had the doll locked up in the outer office building, they would often return to find it sitting comfortably upstairs in Ed's easy chair when they opened the main front door. Now, although the phenomena was also the same as which had occurred in the apartment, neither Ed nor Lorraine were ever physically attacked. This doll is actually now kept in a glass-covered case, and it resides at the Warrens Occult Museum in Connecticut. It is said to make growling noises at times. That is actually one museum that I would love to visit.
Yeah, theirs and John Zappa's. I think we should take a little trip to.
Yes.
Okay, so now we come to the most popular and the most investigated haunted doll in America and possibly the world. I'm talking about Robert the Doll. In the late 1800s, Thomas Otto and his family moved into a mansion at the corner of Eaton and Simonton Streets in Key West, Florida, now known as the Artist's House. The Ottos were known to be stern with their servants, sometimes even mistreating them. It was the treatment of one such Haitian servant that provides a twist in this story. This woman was hired to take care of their son, Robert. One day, Mrs. Otto supposedly witnessed her practicing black magic in their backyard and fired her. Before she left, the woman gave Robert a lifelike doll which stood 3 feet tall, buttoned for eyes, human hair believed to be Robert's, and filled with straw. Dolls that resembled children were not unheard of during this time, but this one proved to be special. Robert named the doll after himself and often dressed it in his clothes. Robert the doll became his trustworthy companion. He took it with him on shopping trips into the town. The doll had a seat at the dinner table where Robert would sneak it bites of food when his parents weren't looking. Robert would even be tucked into bed with the boy at night. Soon, this innocent relationship took on a strange nature. Soon after, Robert chose to be referred to as his middle name, Jean, after being scolded by his mother. He told her the doll's name was Robert, not his. Gene was often heard in his toy room having conversations with Robert. Gene would say something in his childish manner, and response could be heard in a much lower voice. Sometimes Gene would become very agitated, worrying the servants and his mother. She would, on occasion, burst in to find her son cowering in a corner while Robert sat perched in a chair or on the bed, glaring at him. This was to be only the beginning. Household objects would be found thrown across the room. Gene's toys turned up, mutilated, giggling could be heard. Whenever these unusual acts took place, Gene always said, "Robert did it." The boy took the punishment, but always insisted the blame was Robert. As the mischief grew, more and more servants took their leave as new ones were hired. The Otto's relatives felt it was time to do something. With the recommendation of a great aunt, Gene's parents removed Robert from his care and placed him in a box in the attic. This is where he resided for many years. After the death of his father, Gene was willed his boyhood home. He decided to live in the Victorian mansion with his new wife. Gene had become an artist and felt the house was spacious and would provide a place for him to paint. He went to the attic and dusted off his childhood toy. He became attached to the doll despite his wife's displeasure. Gene would take the doll along with them everywhere they went. He even sat in his favorite little chair while Gene and his wife slept nearby. The turret room became Robert's domain after Mrs. Otto moved him back to the attic. Their marriage slowly became sour until Mrs. Otto supposedly went insane and died of unknown reasons. Gene followed soon behind. Robert supposedly attacked people and sometimes locked them in the attic. People who witnessed by claimed to hear evil laughter coming from the turret room. For some time, Robert remained in the empty house by himself until a new family purchased the mansion and restored it. The doll was once again moved to the attic. This pleased it as much as the last time. The doll was often found throughout the house. On one certain night, Robert was found at the foot of the owner's bed giggling with a kitchen knife in hand, almost like child's play. This was enough to send them fleeing from the home. Robert was later moved to the East Mortella Museum in Key West, where he sits perched in a glass box. Despite his new living quarters, the doll is believed to not have given up his menacing ways. Visitors and employees claim that they have seen the doll move. His smile has been known to turn into a scowl. One employee claimed Robert turned off all the lights and left for the night. The next day, they returned to find the lights turned on, Robert sitting in a different position than the night before, and a fresh layer of dust on his shoes. Some say he'll even curse you. If you want to take a picture of him, you must ask politely. He'll tilt his head in permission. However, if he doesn't, and you take the picture anyways, a curse will befall upon you and anyone who accompanied you to the museum. The same will happen if you make fun of him. To this day, Robert remains in the East Mortella Museum in his sailor suit, clutching his stuffed lion, continuing his menacing ways.
You do know that this is another one that I want to add to our list of places I want to go. I got to see him. But
yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about them.
I really do. I want to see this doll. But here's another story from British Columbia, and it's about a haunted doll named Mandy. Mandy the haunted doll lives at the Quesnel Museum, which is located on Old Caribou Gold Rush Trail in British Columbia. She is just one of over 30,000 artifacts on display for the public, but there's little doubt that she is the most unique. Now, Mandy was donated to the museum in 1991. At that time, her clothing was dirty, her body was ripped, and her head was full of cracks. At that time, she was estimated to be over 90 years old. The saying around the museum is, she may act like an ordinary antique doll, but she's much more than that. Now, the woman who donated Mandy, also called Miranda, told the museum creator that she would wake up in the middle of the night hearing a baby crying from the basement. When she investigated, she would find a window near the doll open where it had previously been closed and the curtains blowing in the breeze. The donor later told the curator that after the doll was given to the museum, she was no longer disturbed by the sounds of the baby crying in the night. Some say Mandy has unusual powers. Many speculate that the doll has acquired these powers over the years, but little is known about this doll's history, and nothing can be said for certain. What is certain is the unusual effect she seems to have on everyone around her. As soon as Mandy arrived at the museum, staff and volunteers began to have weird and unexplainable experiences. Lunches would disappear from the refrigerator and later be found tucked away in a drawer. Footsteps were heard when no one was around. Pens, books, photos, and many other small items would go missing. Some were never found, but some actually turned up later. The staff passed these events off as absent-mindedness, but this didn't account for everything. Mandy did not have a permanent home inside the museum when she first arrived. She was placed in the museum entranceway facing the public, and visitors would stare and talk about the doll with a cracked and broken face and sinister smile. Eventually, Mandy was moved to another part of the museum where she was carefully placed alone in a display case because the museum staff had been told that she could not be placed with other dolls because she would harm them. Since her permanent placement, there have been many stories about encounters with that haunted doll. One visitor was videotaping Mandy only to have the camera light go on and off every 5 seconds. When the visitor's camera was turned on another exhibit, it functioned just fine. Now, it's interesting to note that the same thing often happens when visitors try to photograph Robert the doll in his Key West museum home. Some visitors are very disturbed by the doll's eyes, which they say they appear to follow them around the room. Others claim to have seen the doll actually blink, and still others say they have seen the doll in one position, and then minutes later, she will appear to have moved. Although they're used to it by now, the museum staff and volunteers still prefer not to be the last one working or locking up the museum at the end of the day. Anthony, I do have one more story, and it's not such a famous doll, but her story did touch my heart. May I?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I found this story on hauntedDolls.net, and it's about a doll haunted with the spirit of a Cherokee child. Now, the post reads, Shanda is a Native American Cherokee child spirit who's attached herself to a Caucasian doll. The person I purchased her from happens to live in the area, which was a part of the Trail of Tears. Thousands of Native Americans travel the Trail of Tears, and sadly, over 500 of them are buried in a nearby cemetery. The journey was hard on each of them, but it took its toll, especially on the elderly and young children. Now, this woman, she found Shanda on an estate sale near Collins River and the Caldwell Mountain. She said as soon as she saw Shanda, she could feel her energy, and she had very amazing energy. She's only 5 years old, but she carries the outstanding pride that her people instilled in her. As well, she has much forgiveness in her spirit. She and her people were wronged beyond words, but Shanda holds no hate. She has a sweet and loving nature. Some of the activity that has been experienced is hearing a child's voice speaking in a language that isn't understood, and it's said that it is her native Cherokee tongue. And she's also been seen as a dark shadow child with long braids. I found this post to be very sweet, but very sad. Osiyo, Shanda.
Okay, so there's going to be some folks out there, and I'm sure they are right now, even in the chat room, think that they have these haunted dolls and these objects. So now what? What do we do with them? If we have these haunted dolls in our home, what do we do with them? I want to get rid of it. What do I do with it, or how do I get rid of this haunt? Well, we mentioned before John Zappis, and he has said that there are a few things that you should do. But first, there are 2 things that you should not do, and I guarantee you these are probably 2 things that you would automatically do in response to any kind of experience with a haunted doll in your house. He says, do not, number 1, burn it, whatever the item is, either it be a doll or not, or some other object. Do not burn it. And he says, number 2, do not just throw it in the trash. You cannot just throw this out. He says the reason why you don't want to do this is because you could actually end up releasing that energy that is within the object or the doll, and it could come into you. But what he does say is two things. What you should do is either bury it underground somewhere, sort of like giving it a ritual ceremonial burial, or to throw it into a large body of water like an ocean. If you choose to keep the haunted object, but want to make sure that the spirit or energy stays within the object, a binding prayer or a ritual should be performed by the clergy. The goal of these rituals is actually to cease any spiritual phenomenon associated with the item. Items that are particularly active should be kept in cases, and each time the item is removed from the case, another ritual should be performed on the item.
That's good advice, Anthony, because I think my computer is haunted. It's always acting weird.
Yeah, mine too. Maybe we should do a binding to IBM or something, right?
Well, actually, I think that's all we have on Haunted Dolls. This show was a little creepy to do, but it was fun as always. So now I believe it's time to begin our segment on Paranormal World News.
Paranormal World News with your hosts, Anthony Agati and Luci Leitbreed.
Wow, that's some snazzy music you got there.
We're moving up in the world, huh?
My first story tonight is from the Telegraph, and it is a Polish town is in shock as blood bubbles from drains. Residents of, and I'm going to butcher this, Kachina, a small Polish town, called in the police and ambulance service to investigate after blood began streaming out from under manhole covers. After bubbling through the holes in the cover, the blood formed a river of red that flowed along a road in the Polish town, forming large bloody puddles. Now, an investigation revealed that the blood had come from the meat processing plant, and it seeped onto the streets because of a blocked drain. The police were called, and they were investigating to find out who was responsible for it. But confronted with pools of blood on their street, the locals, of course, they reacted with horror. There's 2 schools on the street where a large amount of blood was flowing, wrote one angry resident on the news website. The blood was also heading towards the local market. Now, when you considered public health, the situation was appalling. People also questioned as to how the blood managed to leave the meat processing plant without any form of treatment, despite possible environmental risks. A spokesman for the municipal authorities said the situation was now under control and the blood has been removed from the streets. Imagine seeing that when you're going to work in the morning. My next story is actually a really, really cool one, and this is from friend of the show, Jeff Mudgett. And it has to do with Jack the Ripper and a book that Jeff Mudgett wrote. And basically, here goes. This is the actual press release, and it's the handwriting on the wall. Jack the Ripper's true identity discovered. This is in Los Angeles. This was from January 24th. Jack the Ripper, the chilling phrase, is recognized by billions, yet his true identity remained one of today's greatest unsolved mysteries. Now the mystery may be solved, proven by both scientific direct evidence and thorough investigations made by Jeff Mudgett, who is actually born and raised in San Diego, and he's the great-great-grandson of the infamous serial killer H.H. Holmes, and he is the author of Bloodstains. Newly released forensic evidence shows that the handwriting of the famous Ripper letters were a match with Holmes' handwriting on his letters from prison. The obvious similarity between the 2 specimens are remarkable, even to the untrained eye. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known under the alias of Dr. H.H. Holmes, was the first documented American serial killer in the modern sense of the term. Now, in approximately 1892, in Chicago, my hometown, just in time for the World's Fair, Holmes opened a hotel, which was later dubbed the Murder Castle, which he designed and built for himself, specifically with murder in mind. While he confessed to 27 murders, his actual body count is thought to be probably much higher than 200. Now, while he was researching Holmes' story, Jeff became increasingly aware of the possibility that Holmes could be Jack the Ripper. He was also aware how difficult it was going to be to prove, considering the lack of evidence amidst the constant barrage of Jack the Ripper hoaxes. Now, after his book Bloodstains was published in 2011, Jeff was visited by one of his readers who had also contended that the men were one and the same. The reader had forensic evidence, although largely circumstantial, that was astounding. He had submitted handwriting evidence to the renowned British Library, who, after their own review, recommended that Miss Margaret Webb, a professional expert opinion, in order to determine if the two works had been done by the same hand. Now, this past July, Miss Webb returned her conclusion that both were absolutely the same hand, and that Holmes was the author of the Ripper letters. Now, when her opinion was released to the world, as well as another expert's similar opinion, Miss Webb's conclusion was lambasted, largely because she was a graphologist and not solely a handwriting expert. Now, despite the British Library's respect and admiration, in researching the difference between the two occupations, Jeff, an attorney by trade, came across the United States Supreme Court's Daubert decision, which ruled expert testimony concerning handwriting would no longer be admissible until it rested on a reliable foundation and was generated from scientific knowledge. Now, because of this landmark decision, the U.S. Post Office and the Department of Justice hired a mathematic and scientific firm from the University of Buffalo to create a computer program to differentiate the millions of styles of handwriting. It was, when activated, the new program, if given substantial documents, was getting it right actually 96% of the time. And ABC News ran segments about this new breakthrough in forensic science and trial evidence. Jeff contacted the experts, the scientists at the University of Buffalo, and they agreed to donate their services in the interest of history. The conclusion reached by these scientists was that the classifier performance number, which is actually 97%, can be taken to indicate that the Jack the Ripper and Mudgett classes are similar in style. Now, to understand this number, consider if two of your own documents that were compared, and the number wouldn't reach 100%. The scientists further discussed the difficulties with the historical age and cursive rather than character nature of the document. More samples were sent immediately, and additional data is forthcoming. Scotland Yard has also been notified of the results. So therefore, by scientific evidence as required by the U.S. Supreme Court, Holmes was the author of the Ripper letters, and the author's legal opinion, Jack the Ripper. So actually, I do have a few facts regarding Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes. And actually right now Warner Brothers is making a movie version of The Devil in the White City, which is actually the story of H.H. Holmes. And it's going to star Leonardo DiCaprio, who is going to play the actual lead role of Holmes. And this film is going to come out in 2013. Now, the Murder Castle, which is in the Englewood neighborhood of my hometown here, it consisted of gas chambers. It had grease chutes that was used to transport the bodies into the basement for surgery below. It's got lime pits It's got huge ovens, and it actually is a factory of death and murder. The murder castle right now is actually the site of a U.S. post office. Now, Holmes himself graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School in June 1884. He actually stole bodies from the laboratory. He disfigured the bodies, and he claimed that the people were killed accidentally in order to collect insurance money for the policies that he took out on each person. He also sold those bodies to medical schools. There is an actual record of Holmes traveling to London in 1888 to visit medical schools to sell his skeletons. Now, he's said to have disappeared from the Chicago area the entire time that the Ripper murders took place. And coincidentally, the Ripper killing stopped abruptly when Holmes returned to Chicago in that December of 1988. After Holmes was reportedly hanged, his body was encased in a concrete-filled coffin, which was lowered into a deep 10-foot grave filled with concrete. The infamous Holmes curse is said to haunt anyone involved in his arrest, trial, or execution. And almost 125 years after the fact, if you type Jack the Ripper into Google, you'll see, well, it's actually searched 165,000 times per month. This story is absolutely amazing. And I think it's more amazing to me because I live in the city. I know where this post office is. And hopefully we're going to do a show a little bit later on with Jack himself so that we can, dive deeper into this amazing story. Now, let's see. My next story is from theexaminer.com, and it is about an alien landing proof in JFK secret tapes. President Kennedy's ambition for the U.S. space program can be heard in a new video which analyzes backwards encrypted messages in newly released secret White House tapes. The 35th President of the United States, who served from 1961 until his assassination in 1963, actually recorded over 248 hours of meeting conversations, which included one with the ambassador to the Soviet Union, on a system that was reportedly closely held secret even from his top aides. Now, the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum today announced that it has declassified and made available the final 45 hours of White House recordings that were secretly taped during the president's time in office. Now, President Kennedy, his paranormal interests are highlighted in his top secret memo to then CIA Director John McClone 10 days before his assassination. And he requested a classification review of all UFO intelligence files related to national security. Now, this formally classified document, which actually was released in 2011, in response to a Freedom of Information Act request, proposed a review of high-threat cases among a program of data sharing with NASA where unknowns were a factor. Secret messages were encrypted backwards in the president's conversation with Floyd Kohler, recorded on September 17th, 1963. And JFK expressed his UFO interest 8 weeks before the memo was written. There is a transcript of the exchange between the U.S. and the Russians in cooperation with the space, showing. Well, let me go through the transcript a little bit. There's actually one message. It's a secret message, and it says, "I saw a spacecraft, found a gray." And the Russians actually responded by saying they're very intrigued by this, Mr. President. I mentioned this when I talked to Andrei Gromyko, who actually was the Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs. And it said that they were intrigued but a little puzzled. He referred to it as a very imagining thing and asked if they ever gave any thought to it. President Kennedy responded by saying, I have an agreement on when we both try to go to the moon that we wouldn't have this intensive race. I don't know whether they're going to be on the moon. Another secret message says, I saw the spacecraft. Proof aliens landed here. Kohler said, I think maybe he's right, but you have to have a serious resource. The pressure of the claims on a very limited budget must be enormous, and it does refer to it occasionally. The pressures must be great when resources are very limited. There is also reference to mirror messages. Now, President Kennedy reflected on a graph of his digitally sampled speech across the y-axis, which enables audio playback and monitoring in reverse. The messages detected through this procedure are formed by an unconscious process related to sleep talking. And the examiner actually says that they have reported on how such analysis has been proven effective in gathering intelligence for military, political, forensic, clinical, and other UFO disclosure applications. Now, the examiner also says that they reported how a Vancouver-based investigative research study found the detection of the secret messages encrypted backwards within the human voice, and it fulfills the legacy demands of the scientific community for an advanced technique of UFO witness interrogation. There is a UFO experience scientific study, and this was published in 1960, which says that Project Blue Book, which I think we mentioned previously on one of our shows about UFOs, was actually a cover-up to the extent that the assigned problem was glossed over for one reason or another. In many years, association with Blue Book, actually there's people that say they don't recall ever one serious discussion of methodology and improving the process of data gathering or techniques of comprehensive interrogation of witnesses. So basically, what it seems like the story is trying to say is that President Kennedy actually had knowledge of UFOs coming down here, and, you know, all the time that we spent back in listening to the Beatles records backwards, we should have been listening to Kennedy's speeches backwards. So gives you something to think about. So next time you see a UFO in the sky, think about it. They've probably been here for a while. My next story is from ParanormalOldPueblo.com. And do solar flares affect the paranormal? All this week we've been hearing and talking about the major solar flares that have been happening, how they're affecting like your cell phone, how they're affecting communication. And a majority of ghost hunting communities believe that in times of increased solar activity, paranormal activity is stirred up. Why? It's common knowledge among the paranormal investigators that spirits feed off energy generated by electrical sources such as electrical appliances and batteries. And I can vouch for the batteries, okay? They always drain my batteries. It's often thought that ghosts often produce or disturb electromagnetic energy, and they need to fuel themselves in order to manifest. Well, on the latest episode of Ghost Hunters, one of the newest ghost hunting tools that they introduced it's similar in size and shape to a phone booth. And basically, the interior of an enclosed booth is bombarded with electromagnetic pulses to lure and to assist the spirit into manifesting. While no spirit activity was captured in the booth during this particular investigation that they showed, it seems plausible that it could work. And I think actually when Ghost Adventures did their live show at, I can't remember what it was, there was a similar device that was used. Now, if you're a paranormal investigator, it might prove useful for you to check out the prevailing geomagnetic influences or even the current phase of the moon. And I'm actually really curious that, if some of our listeners, have you noticed during all of the solar activity, have you found that there's been more manifestations? Have you found more evidence? I mean, it's something to think about. Anthony, what do you have?
Maybe that's why we've got all those strange sounds coming out, those reports for the past few weeks now. Maybe that has something to do with these, solar flares or these solar storms that are coming about. I don't know, something to think about. Okay, I have a couple of stories. The first one is titled, Russian Scientists Claim Scorpion-like Alien Found on Venus, but NASA Disagrees. And this is from the Huffington Post. And the story goes like this. A Russian scientist says that a video of the surface of Venus from a Soviet probe sent there in 1982 shows evidence of a scorpion-like creature, along with other objects that he believes are evidence of life. However, NASA scientists say that the objects in question are more likely video distortions and a lens cap. Leonid Zafamilati works for the Space Research Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences and recently published his detailed analysis of video taken by the Russian Venus 13 probe. His article in the Russian Solar System Research magazine points out 3 objects he says were constantly moving. Besides the quote-unquote scorpion, Zafamilati pointed out a disc-shaped object and a black patch. The idea of life on Venus is not given much credence, but most mainstream scientists, because of the extreme surface temperatures, which can exceed 800 degrees in Fahrenheit. Alexander Bazalevsky, chief of the Russian Academy of Sciences Geochemistry Institute, is one of those scientists. He told Russia Today that Zafamilati is a true, serious scientist. However, life forms we are familiar with are protein-based, and they would never survive on Venus. NASA scientists also have their doubts. NASA mission planner Jonathan Hill told the Daily Mail it makes much more sense that this piece of the lander designed to break off during the deployment of one of the scientific instruments. Other experts disregard the disk as a lens cap and argue that the object Zafamilati believes to be a scorpion-like creature is actually just distortion from noise in the video. Zafamilati doesn't think the objects are simply technical glitches. He says, without going into the present conception that life wouldn't be possible on Venus given its conditions, we can take a long shot and say that the given morphological characteristics allows us to assume that certain objects have qualities of living beings. They emerge, fluctuate, and disappear. Zafamilati claims that scorpion-like creatures moves around for 26 minutes before disappearing. He thinks there may have been other creatures in the area that were scared away by the probe's touchdown. Zafamilati says he knew the video was important in the 80s, but he chose not to share his discoveries. He decided to re-examine the video given recent discoveries of Earth-sized planets outside our solar system. He plans to publish his findings. My next story is, again, from the Huffington Post, and it's by Andy Campbell, and it's dated January 25th, and it is titled, Psychic Peaches Stevens Scammed Florida Woman Out of $136,000. God, that's a lot of money. What else is in the teachings of Peaches? Fraud? That's what. So say Florida cops who arrested psychic Peaches Stevens. First of all, Peaches? Is that her first name? Sorry. So say Florida cops who arrested psychic Peaches Stevens for allegedly defrauding a woman in Windermere out of $136,000 over 7 years, according to the Orlando Sentinel. Stevens was collared around on January 11th and thrown into Orange County Jail after years-long bid by one of her alleged victims to out the fizzling fortune teller. For the victim, identified during an interview with Anderson Cooper last fall as Pretty Mahalanabas, I think I said that right, Mahalanabas, there were plenty of signs that Stevens wasn't exactly legitimate. First, Stevens allegedly told Mahalanabas, to stuff 11 $100 bills and 11 names of the relatives on a piece of paper in an envelope under her bed, along with a grapefruit to quell the evil that Stevens said was wreaking havoc on her family. Then Mahalanabas bought 7 tabernacles at $19,000 each at Stevens' behest from Stevens to vanquish the negativity, curses, and evil spirits that plagued her family, the paper reported. Thousands of people get defrauded of millions of dollars each year. Mahalanambas, I can't say that word, sorry, her name, wrote her, I wish it was just Peaches, wrote on her Facebook wall last fall, I want to put an end to this so that nobody else will be victimized by these ruthless con artists again. A college student, educated, business-owning mother of two, told the paper that her company was in trouble. Her family was having internal problems, and she wasn't feeling well when she got a letter in the mail from Stevens. She said she was told to pay thousands of dollars, open credit accounts, and hand over $65,000 in jewelry before she realized she was the victim of a scam. Are you kidding me, Lucy? I mean, after $100 of sending something in, I'd say, what the hell is going on? The Huffington Post Weird News team tracked down a self-proclaimed psychic who gives tips on how to differentiate between a benign clairvoyant and a con artist. Grapefruits, evil spirits and money, it's bullcrap. Professionalism medium Tiffany Johnson, a.k.a. Psychic Tiff, told the Huffington Post, whenever any lame-ass psychic wants additional funds, I'll remove a curse for $5,000, for example. Bells and whistles and red flags should be going off. I mean, seriously. A real psychic wants to give you tools so that you can make your own life better. They shouldn't want you to pay anything externally, especially from the psychic. Stevens is free on $22,000 bond, but is barred from telling fortunes until the case is completed, according to WKMG Local 6 News. Here's a few more tips from Psychic Tiff to avoid being the victim of a scam. Use your common sense. If it involves money and it seems fishy, it probably is. If it seems like a mail order scheme, it probably is. Beware of mind readers who prey on fear and look for psychics who are positive and guide you on how to empower yourself. Finally, find a psychic with whom you could see yourself being friends with. If they scare you, annoy you, or take ridiculous amounts of money from you, they're probably not going to help you. God. That's amazing.
God.
Okay, my next story comes from the UK. It's from mirror.co.uk, and it is dated January 18th, and it says, actually, everybody probably knows about this. It's been in the news. The human head that was found at the Hollywood sign. This article actually talks about the myths and legends of the famous Los Angeles landmark, which I didn't actually know about this. In a story that could have come from Hollywood itself, a severed head was found dumped in a plastic bag under the world's famous sign last week. The remains, thought to be that of an Armenian-American man in his 40s, were discovered by dog walkers in the hills of California's Bronson Canyon Park. The case, which is now being treated as a murder, is the latest in a long line of strange occurrences surrounding the landmark, which was erected on Mount Lee in 1923. In its 79-year history, the iconic sign, which originally read Hollywoodland to promote a housing development, has become the subject of countless stories, urban legends, and pranks. The site is reportedly a hotspot of paranormal activity, which many theorists link to the death of a young actress who is believed to have committed suicide at the sign. On the night of September 16, 1932, struggling little-known actress Peg Entwistle is thought to have left her uncle's house on a nearby Beechwood Drive saying she was going to meet friends. Instead, the 24-year-old headed to the Hollywood sign, found a ladder, propped up against the letter H, climbed 50 feet, and jumped to her death. Her coat and purse were reportedly found at the bottom of the letter by a female hiker who informed police, who later discovered her body down a hill near to the sign. A suicide note was allegedly found in the purse, which read, "I am afraid, I am a coward, I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain. P.E." The suicide made national news, and tabloids dubbed Peg the Hollywood sign girl. Over the years, there have been numerous reported paranormal sightings of a blonde woman dressed in the 1930s-style clothing who appears to walk around in a daze. A park ranger at Griffith Park is believed to have seen the female ghost several times and always detects the smell of gardenias, and a couple walking their dog saw the woman appear, then vanish into the same spot. In the 1940s, the sign's letter H toppled over, sparking numerous urban legends as to how it came to happen. Some believe sign caretaker Albert Koth knocked the letter over after plowing it with his car while driving drunk. Another version of events suggests Koth stripped the sign of its copper and sold it to scrap metal after all of its 4,000 bulbs stopped working. The most likely explanation is that the letter H simply toppled over due to a combination of deterioration and strong winds. The Hollywood sign has also been the inspiration for a number of pranks where the letters have been changed to spell different words. This is actually funny. In 1973, black and white sheets were used to cover up the two letters, O's with E's, so the sign read Hollyweed in celebration of California's relaxed marijuana laws. Other rewordings have included Holywood on Easter Sunday, Ollywood following the former U.S. Marine Oliver North's testimony in the Iran-Contra hearings, and Oil War during the Gulf War. And my last story, funny enough, we were just talking about this, strange sounds, mystery being blamed on secret U.S. programs. This is dated January 25th, and it's from gathernews.com. It had to happen. After the strange sounds phenomenon has played out for a week and supposedly had been debunked, it's time to start blaming the U.S. government projects for their weird noises heard around the world. Government officials worldwide are getting tired of fielding inquiries about the strange sounds being heard globally, and some are calling on the U.S. government to reveal whether any programs they're running could be causing the phenomenon. Whether called skyquakes or the hum, it still comes down to the same thing. Videos exposing the so-called hoax of the strange sounds mystery have not stopped people from piling on the debate and claiming it can't be a joke or a viral campaign for a new movie. Now, the U.S. government is being called on the carpet over meteorological experiments conducted by the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, and even the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA, is suspected of conducting secret experiments which are causing the weird noises. Whether or not the U.S. government is responsible for these strange sounds with some super-secret experiments, or if it truly is a hoax, there are some important people around the world anxious to get to the bottom of this mystery. What do you think? Can this be yet another so-called government conspiracy, or are there more normal explanations? And actually, Luci, if I may, next week we're going to be doing a show on these strange sounds. And earlier this week I had sent an email to the government agency HAARP to get an official word from them. I have not received anything as of today yet on them. I'm hoping to get some sort of response before our show next Friday, but I'm going to actually keep plugging away and see if I can get something from them. I don't care if they're tired of being hounded. I know everybody wants an answer, and I know I want an answer, and I know you want an answer. So that's it for my news story.
Actually, I think our listeners want an answer, and I think part of what we want to do is bring as much information about this whole noise situation to our listeners as we can. So,
definitely.
Actually, I think that's the news for now. And now to our section that we're going to feature our paranormal groups. And if I may, I would like to start with the Lower Michigan Paranormal Society, and their website is www.l-m-p-s.com. And this group entails, the members are Keith Hembry, who is the founder, lead investigator. He's an EVP specialist. He is also the lead equipment manager, website designer, and Danielle Armstrong, who is the founder and photographer, Philippe Long, lead investigator and equipment manager, Sean Bright, lead investigator, EVP specialist, equipment tech 1, Marianne Brown, lead investigator, K2 specialist, Mark Wasserman, investigator, Tom Dowling, investigator, and Scott Dowling, investigator. This group, they've met both the Booth brothers, Keith Age, Brian Harnoy. They have investigated at Prospect Place, which we're going to, and I can't wait, Waverly Hill Sanitarium, Moundsville State Penitentiary, Mansfield Reformatory, another place that we like, Valeska Axe Murder House, which I can't wait to get there, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Whispers Estate, South Pittsburgh Hospital, the Stanley Hotel, and with one of the last investigations that they did, they were at, and I hope I'm saying this right, Eridus, a well-known haunted house in Pontiac, Michigan, that has actually been in the Guinness Book of World Records. And then afterwards, they spoke to the owner about evidence. They've been on Channel 4 News in Detroit, and that was on October 27th. And then on November 21st, 2011, they were actually contacted by A&E, the show My Ghost Story, and they're still in negotiations on that, but they are working to get that story put up. And also, they're working with, and, oh, God, I'm going to butcher this, MinMUFON, which is actually one of the world's best-known UFO networks.
Oh, that's great. They're actually a great group. I actually have two groups. The first group is DGPT, which stands for The Guys Paranormal Team, and their website is www.daguysParanormalTeam.com, and they're based out of Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Their head founder is Mark LaRock, and he's the head founder and the head leader of both DGPT and the Kitchener Ghost Walks. Some of the members of the group are Trevor Bishop. He is the co-founder and co-head leader of DGP and the Kitchener Ghost Walks. Christine, she's a part-time DGPT and Kitchener Ghost Walks. She's a full-time consultant, spiritual reader, psychic medium, and an investigator. Pam is a part-time investigator, and she runs her own team, which is called Souls, SOHLS. Jason Fawcett helped start up DGPT. He has a Wiccan background, and he's actually gifted with seeing the dead and able to touch them. And he also helps with Kitchener Ghost Walks part-time. And lastly, out of the group is Jonathan Dupe. He can also see dead people and feel what the spirits have gone through with death. And he helps out as part-time investigator and part-time Kitchener Ghost Walks. Some of their interesting facts and stories, they are actually the first known GLBT paranormal team in existence. And their group formed in 2010 and conducted 12 investigations in the first year since May 2010 to December of 2010. They've done several different things. They've done national exhibits that were at local museum in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Some of their paranormal events that occurred during Kitchener Ghost Walks. Let me see some interesting facts here. On a private tour, 10 ladies came along at an event in October of 2011, and 9 out of the 10 were pregnant. There was one lady, though, that was not, and she was the skeptic one of the group. On their tour, there's a church, and it's supposed to be a spirit of a boy. Well, after they talked and started walking to the next location, the skeptic lady turned to Jason and said, "Do you see that?" Jason turned around and said, "Yeah, that's the little boy on the stairs of the church." So they were very pleased that the skeptic one had actually had a personal experience on their tour. So that is The Guys Paranormal. And my last group I have is from Christina Sullivan. She's the former case manager for the Greenbrier Paranormal Society, which is also GPS, in Lewisburg, West Virginia, and currently the co-founder of Elko Paranormal Association, EPA, in Elko, Nevada, West Virginia. The sister group of Greenbrier Paranormal. Both teams have achieved Ghost Adventure family status, and 2 of their members have appeared on Ghost Adventures twice. The co-founder of both GPS and EPA, Sean Sullivan, which is Christina's husband, was on the Moon River Brewery episode as well as the Ghost Adventures Live. He has been investigating the paranormal since he was 16 years old, so about over 10 years of experience. GPS is now being run by their demonologist, Gene Fields, and their theologist, Kevin Gross. GPS is well known throughout the state of West Virginia as being a scientific and professional team. They just started EPA last month, so they are working on some investigations. Christina has a scientific background, so she can really bring validation to their evidence, and any evidence they find usually goes through her first. Christina actually has appeared on the main Ghost Hunters radio show as well, and Sean is currently attending to school to receive a degree in filmmaking. They made a rough documentary called Haunted Journeys, but they never got a chance to show it in the theater. So they're hoping to do a new documentary soon, especially with all of the film festivals there in Elko. So any questions that you have, you can contact them on Facebook or via Twitter at GB Paranormal or at Sean_GPS or at SnowBDChick82. So that is GPS, EPA, Greenbrier Paranormal Society, and Elko Paranormal Association.
Wow. I think that's it for tonight, unless you can think of anything else, Anthony. This was a great show, and it was so much fun to do. But actually now I think I need to check under my bed to see if there's nothing underneath it. Anthony, as always, I want to thank you so much for everything you do to put the show on. And I also want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did. Now, remember, the show is for you, the listener. Send us your comments, your suggestions. Just say hello. We hope you come back next week. We're going to go through all those sounds that are being heard all over the world. Join the conversation as we ask that question, what is that noise? And on that note, have a paranormal week, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review Radio.